Today I will tell you two cave stories that ended horribly. In the first story, a man fell from a height of 1,000 meters, broke his spine, and was left alone in the dark for 7 days. In the second story, a diver got stuck upside down underwater and waited for 6 hours for his oxygen to run out. Both faced impossible situations. Which one survived? Both? Neither. We leave it to the audience's judgment. Welcome to Cave Tragedies. He had been lost underground for 7 days, away from daylight, without food, water, or light. All around him was darkness, silence, and the echo of his own screams. When they found him, he was on the verge of losing his mind. The date was June 12, 2014. Johann Westhauser, a 52-year-old German cave explorer, descended into the Riesending cave in southern Germany with his friends. It was one of Europe's deepest caves, kilometers of tunnels, a depth of 1,100 meters, labyrinthine passages. The team was experienced, everyone was skilled. However, the deeper they went, the greater the danger became. The first fatal mistake was underestimating this risk. The team had been exploring the depths of the cave for days. On the morning of June 12th, they reached a narrow passage at a depth of 1,000 meters. Johann prepared to jump to the other side of the passage. It was a normal movement he had done dozens of times. He planted his feet firmly on the ground and jumped. But this time, his foot slipped. His body lost its balance, and he fell onto the hard rocks 3 meters below. A terrible cracking sound echoed. Johann's scream filled the cave. His back had hit the rocks. The pain was unbearable. He was writhing on the ground, unable to breathe. The team rushed to his side. Johann was in very bad shape. His back was broken. He had a deep wound on his head, and he was bleeding. He could also have internal bleeding. Panic set in. They were 1,000 meters deep, a full kilometer below ground. The nearest exit was kilometers of tunnel and hours away. Johann couldn't move. Every movement caused him pain. His spine might have been seriously damaged. Carrying him could paralyze him, but leaving him there meant certain death. The team made a difficult decision. One person would go up and call for emergency help. The others would stay with Johann, keep him warm, comfort him, and keep him alive. The cave had taken them prisoner. It was dark, cold, and unforgiving, and it would be days before help arrived. On the surface, the alarm was raised. Germany's largest cave rescue operation began. 1,000 volunteers, experts from 12 countries, doctors, mountaineers, cave rescue teams. But Johann was 1,000 meters deep. Getting him out could take a week. Inside the cave, Johann was fighting for his life. He had fractures in his back. The slightest wrong movement could sever his spinal cord, leaving him completely paralyzed. The wound on his head continued to bleed. Hypothermia had set in. The cave's temperature was only 5 degrees Celsius. The team wrapped him in blankets and brought small heaters, but it wasn't enough. Johann began to shiver. Johann was racing against time and death. On the second day, the first professional rescue team reached Johann. The doctors brought medical supplies and stretchers. However, a specially made stretcher was needed to transport Johann safely. It had to be sturdy enough to fit through narrow tunnels and protect his broken spine. Lowering this stretcher 1,000 meters down would take hours. On the third day, the special stretcher finally arrived. The doctors placed Johann on the stretcher extremely slowly and carefully. Every movement was painful for Johann. Then began one of the most challenging rescue journeys in history. Climbing 1,000 meters back up, narrow tunnels, steep slopes, water-dripping passages. Each was an obstacle to overcome. Constantly rotating teams were needed to carry the stretcher. Every 50 meters, a fresh team replaced the exhausted one. On the fourth day, Johann's condition deteriorated dangerously. His pulse weakened, his consciousness became clouded. The risk of internal bleeding was increasing. The doctors intervened urgently. IV fluids, medication, oxygen tanks. But the cave wasn't letting him go easily. The tunnels seemed endless. On the 5th day, Johann had been halfway up the 500-meter descent in the hands of the teams. However, He still had 500 meters to go to reach the surface. Could his body withstand this stress? The rescue teams were exhausted and hopeless. Every passing hour reduced Johann's chances of survival. Johann was injured at a depth of 1,000 meters and was brought up over 5 days. Do you think his body could withstand this horrific stress? Or did the cave claim him forever? Share your predictions in the comments, because the outcome of this story will go down in rescue history books. On the 6th day, Johann was approaching the surface with only the last 100 meters remaining. But the hardest part was just beginning. The final tunnel was almost vertical, a slippery slope with water constantly dripping down. The team gathered their last reserves of strength. They pulled the stretcher with ropes, lifting it centimeter by centimeter. Johann was semi-conscious, but still breathing. June 19th, 2014, 11:45 p.m. Exactly 7 days later, Johann Westhauser was pulled from the cave. The ambulance helicopter was waiting. Doctors intervened immediately. His spine was broken. He had severe head trauma, and he was suffering from severe hypothermia, but he was alive. 1,000 people, 7 days, 1,000 meters deep. One of the greatest cave rescue operations in history had been successfully completed. Johann was taken to the hospital. He underwent surgery to repair his spine. His spine was stabilized with steel plates. Months of intensive physical therapy began. Slowly, he learned to walk again. It was a true miracle. Doctors couldn't fully explain how he survived for so long under those conditions at a depth of 1,000 meters. The cold, the trauma, the stress, each could have been fatal on its own, but Johann endured. The lesson of the story: depth changes everything. An accident at a depth of 1,000 meters is completely different from one on the surface. Rescue efforts take days. Every minute is spent on the thin line between life and death. Johann's mistake was underestimating the risk. A fall of just 3 meters nearly cost him his life. But this tragedy also showed the power of human solidarity. 1,000 people from 12 different countries came together for one man. Volunteers risked their own lives, diving into narrow tunnels, passing through water passages, going without sleep for days, just to save one life. After Johann recovered, he returned to caving, but he was now more careful, more humble. Caves don't forgive, he said. One mistake meant death, but when humanity comes together, it can perform miracles. The Riesending Cave still stood there, 1,100 meters deep, dark, desolate, and silent. The spot where Johann had fallen was marked as a warning for future generations. The cave had nearly killed him, but 1,000 people brought him back. Tragedy turned into heroism. For 6 hours, he was trapped upside down, underwater, in dark tunnels. The laws of physics made this impossible, but he survived. On November 8, 2010, 32-year-old Eric Establi was diving alone at the Fontaine de Vaucluse spring in southern France. This was one of the world's deepest underground water sources, with unexplored tunnels and unknown depths. Eric was an experienced cave diver, but diving alone that day would prove to be a fatal mistake. Fontaine de Vaucluse was an enchanting place, with crystal clear waters gushing from mysterious depths, but beneath the surface lay a deadly labyrinth of narrow tunnels and passages that suddenly plunged deep. Eric had dived early in the morning. His equipment was flawless: 2 oxygen tanks, a powerful flashlight, a spare regulator. Everything was under control. He descended to a depth of 50 meters, then entered a narrow tunnel. The tunnel curved downward along a dark passage. Eric pressed on. Then disaster struck. The flashlight's cord caught on a rock protrusion. As he tried to pull back, the regulator's cord got caught between the rocks. He reflexively turned, but as he moved, his foot caught on another rock. His body twisted. The current dragged him upside down and pinned him. He was hanging upside down, feet up, suspended beneath the water. The narrow tunnel prevented him from moving. He panicked. He tried to pull himself back and escape, but it was impossible. The tunnel had trapped him, and he was alone. No one knew where Eric was. The water was silently surrounding him. The oxygen tank was still working, but how long would it last? The cave was slowly preparing to suffocate him. Eric was hanging upside down, his body squeezed into the narrow tunnel. Gravity was pumping blood to his head. His ears were ringing. He felt pressure in his eyes. Breathing was difficult. The regulator was working, but his position was crushing his lungs. First hour. He struggled for minutes. He tried to free his feet, but the rock held him tight. He tried to twist his body around. The tunnel wouldn't allow it. Every movement squeezed him tighter. Then he accepted the terrible truth. He couldn't get out on his own. Second hour. Panic gave way to calm. He remembered meditation techniques, slowed his breathing, calmed his heart. He had to conserve oxygen. He remained motionless, taking only regular breaths, but the cold was beginning to seep into his body. The water temperature was 13 degrees Celsius. Hypothermia was slowly approaching. Third hour. As the hours passed, his mind began to cloud over. He could no longer distinguish reality from fantasy. He began to see visions. His family, his children. Would he never see them again? He looked at the gauge on the oxygen tank. It was half full. Maybe 2 more hours? Then what would happen? Outside, no one knew Eric was missing. His wife grew concerned when he didn't come home that evening. She called the police. They found his car in Fontaine de Vaucluse, his diving equipment missing. They understood Eric was underwater. At midnight, rescue divers arrived, but diving into the dangerous tunnels in the dark was like suicide. They would have to wait until morning. Sixth hour. Eric's consciousness was fading. The cold and lack of oxygen was slowing his brain. The regulator was still working, but how much longer could he hang suspended underwater at a depth of 50 meters? Physics said it was impossible. The human body couldn't survive upside down underwater for that long. Eric should have died, but he was still breathing. When morning came, would the rescue divers find him, or would they only find his body? Share your thoughts in the comments, because what happened will astonish the medical world. In the morning, rescue divers entered the water. They searched the depths of Fontaine de Vaucluse. At 9 a.m., they found Eric hanging motionless in the narrow tunnel. They thought he was dead. They approached him. Then they saw that air bubbles were still coming out of his regulator. He was breathing. 6 hours. The human body cannot survive in this position for that long. Blood pressure should have damaged his brain, and lack of oxygen should have led to death. But Eric was alive. Rescue efforts began immediately. It took half an hour to free Eric's foot from the rock. They slowly pulled him up. When they brought him to the surface, Eric was unconscious, but his heart was beating. They took him to the hospital by ambulance. The doctors were shocked. Severe hypothermia, risk of brain edema, water in his lungs. But he was alive. Eric spent a week in intensive care. He slowly recovered. Doctors described his survival as a miracle. They couldn't fully explain why he didn't die. They had a few theories. The cold water may have slowed his metabolism, preventing brain damage. Meditation may have lowered his heart rate, conserving oxygen. And maybe, just maybe, a little luck. The lesson of the story: diving alone is deadly, even for the most experienced divers. Eric's mistake was simple. He didn't tell anyone, and he didn't have a backup diver. When an accident happened, no one could help him. He waited 6 hours, face to face with death, because he was alone. However, Eric's survival demonstrated the incredible resilience of the human body. He remained upside down underwater for 6 hours and managed to escape from where he was trapped. His calmness, meditation, and oxygen conservation kept him alive. After recovering, Eric never dived alone again. "I should have died," he said, "but somehow I survived. Now, every time I dive, I remember those 6 hours. Loneliness means death underwater." Fontaine de Vaucluse is still there, waiting, silently and mysteriously, with its dark waters and deep tunnels. The miracle saved him, but next time he might not be so lucky.